Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Get ready for truth bombs, belly laughs, and the kind of accent that turns car into a two-syllable adventure. Here's your host, Shaun.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the Edge of Liberty right here on the SHR Media Network. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. In a moment, you're going to see the video that I recorded earlier today, part one, with author of Deprogramming Democrats, former advocate who worked in the government, former Democrat who has broken free, Lisa Ekman. If you haven't checked out Lisa's book, Deprogrammingdemocrats.com, you can find it on Amazon. It's a great book. I was fortunate enough to get a copy. I have a copy. I've read it cover to cover. I would recommend everybody doing so. This is part one. Part two, I'm going to play tomorrow night. Before BZ's show, I'm going to play it at 6. It should be over by 7. It's about 48 minutes long or so. It's just, this was too long for a one night recording. It had to break up, and I just felt it did it more justice for it to be on earlier. So without any further ado, here is the interview with Lisa and I. Well, the interview is with Lisa. I just happen to be there. Ladies audio. So I apologize for that. I'm going to fix that. I don't know why it didn't share with audio. But I'm trying to fix that right now. Give me about 8 seconds. I already know what it is. All right. This should be a lot better now. 35 minutes talking about stuff that we weren't even planning on talking about. So who knows how long this will go for.
Yeah, we certainly can get talking. And I mean, I'll say that as we started thinking about what to talk about, there's no shortage of stuff that's happened in 2025. So I think we can have a lot of conversation. But thanks for having me back, and it's a pleasure to wrap up or talk about a year-end wrap-up as things seem to be just getting crazier and crazier every day.
And I think we can both agree that this is the fastest year ever. And somehow reality has changed the aspect of what time really is, it seems like, as we go forward. We were just talking about that before we go on the air. And I think it is, I think it's really important for people, and I get it. We're not young people anymore, right? We're not that 21, 22-year-old person who's out there living their best life and doing crazy stuff or whatever. But it is true, and I feel like I'm my father and my grandfather as I say this. The older we get, time just flies by, and I think that's a natural occurrence anyhow. And then you add in where we are in tech and life in 2025 and technology and stress and all this other stuff. It's like fast forwarding on a regular basis. And I'll tell you something, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I'm not a fan either. I think there's a couple of things. This is actually something my brother said to me many years ago, and I think it's really true. As you get older, each unit of time, whatever that unit is a smaller percentage of your life, of the experiences you've had. So it's going to seem smaller. So I think as you get older, and I think also your experience of time is so subjective. You could be in one situation on one day and it seems to take forever, and that same situation on another day may seem to fly by. So time being really subjective, and if you want to get really into it, if you think about quantum physics and all of that, time doesn't actually exist in a linear fashion. So if you want to start talking about that, that's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But no, I think that's really true. I think we're getting so much in the 24-hour news cycle, sound bites, and people are looking for that constant dopamine hit. We might have talked about this in the first, and I think that's part of it too, that if you are involved, if you're engaging in an activity and you're not getting a dopamine hit, our brains are so trained with, as you were saying before we started recording, reels and shorts and everything else, and the algorithm's constantly feeding you something new, that people have difficulty, I guess, concentrating and focusing anymore. And I'm also not, I just think the experience of time is just really, really different. And we're in such a instant gratification, I want it now mode, that why do I have to wait till tomorrow to get something? I'm like, I can remember it used to take months to get something you were
Anything, right?
Yeah, it did. And then once you got it, you were super excited. But I think
The waiting now, you look back, the waiting for something, and a great example is, remember when you used to be able to send away for stuff in the back of a magazine? Didn't matter what it was, right? And part of the fun was the waiting. You couldn't go online every 30 seconds and see where the processing situation was. Do I have a tracking label that's been made yet? Yada, yada, yada. This came up. I was at dinner with friends last evening. They were preparing what we were going to eat for dinner. They needed a rice cooker because the other one broke, and they were like, "Oh, well, I just won't have it for today. I'll order one on Amazon. It'll be here, whatever." And it came 2 hours later, completely unexpected. And it's like, if I could get something in 2 hours, like, it's incredible to me where we're at with stuff like that now. You brought up the shorts and reels, and I think this is important before we start breaking down maybe why this year was a complete mess, uh, as it was. But when you're on this side and you're doing research on how to promote a show and how to get people to get views, everything right now is shorts, reels, TikToks, right? 30 seconds, 45 seconds, maybe 90 seconds. That is what is trending in the podcast world, in the video world. And even you'll notice even large news stations now cut down all of their segments are shorter. They're very segmented, and they're doing that so it can be clipped for all of these shorts and reels. Because like you said, people just doom scroll. They go for that dopamine hit, and that's the only way, not the only way, but that's the majority of the way that it gets consumed now. So now that everybody is thoroughly depressed on how our attention span is in America and the world right now.
Well, with that in mind, Shaun, let's do a really long form conversation, right?
And let's talk about why it's so depressing on top of it all, and really wrap this up nicely.
Well, I think though, and I think that's part of why I struggle with social media. I'll be really honest. Whether it is, I can't tell you how many times someone will take probably hours to write a long form post on X, and half of the comments are, "I'm not reading all of that," and it's like, okay. And I get it, sometimes you only have to read a sentence or two and know you don't want to read the rest. But the point of me bringing that up is that I don't know how you translate nuance and complicated ideas into the formats that people are using to get information these days in a way that is that is helpful, you know.
I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for a second here, and I'm going to tell you that that is designed specifically so you can't put nuance in, right? They don't want people to look at the complexity of something. They don't want to look at it to be in depth. They want you to emotionally react to two sentences, yes or no, right or wrong, angry, not angry.
You're
That
100% right. I 100% agree. It frustrates me because
Mhm.
reality lives in nuance. Truth lives in nuance.
It frustrates me as somebody who uses social media quite a bit. I'll be a second paragraph into a response to somebody, and I'll even say out loud, "Nobody's going to freaking read this." Like,
Yeah. Um, so I think it's a challenge and something that we have to think about. And I think I'll out my age, which I think I did on the first one. But back when we didn't even have email, text messages, nothing. I grew up pretty technology free. I mean, there weren't answering machines. You could get a busy signal when I was a kid. No microwave, nothing. Um, and
you used to be able to call and get the time on the phone back in the day.
Yeah, you did, because you didn't. People actually wore watches all the time, and it wasn't just because they're cool things.
Right. It
It
wasn't
was because otherwise you didn't know what time it was. Because everyone
You used to also remember, and this is just turning into a we're old and complaining segment, but you remember that you used to know 50 something phone numbers of different people.
Oh yeah,
Uncles, aunts, grandparents, friends, neighbors, right? The local pizza shop, if you were going to order a pizza, like you used to know random phone numbers off the top of your head. And I'll tell you right now, I am horrible at that now. I am
I
so
am too. If I called a number once, I'd remember it for a month
Mhm.
and if I used it again within a month, then I'd probably remember it. I barely know my partner's phone number by heart. That's how bad it is. And it's also like, I don't know. Um, I think I used to be able to know directions. I used to have pictures of maps in my head. I don't anymore. I just use the phone.
I
So
do that well still. Um, and that could have just been from driving a semi for a few years across the West Coast. But it's amazing to me, the last batch of phone numbers I remember are the ones before phones had screens that you could actually text with, and it was just, the StarTAC or the Nokia, and it was still quicker to punch in the number than it was to scroll through and find the number you're trying to call. That's like the last set of numbers that I think are locked in my head that I could still probably pull 5 or 6 big ones out. But overall, nope.
no, I'm with you. And so I think when you are constantly shoving content into your brain, it
Except
makes it much more difficult for your brain to hold any of the content. And I'm
except
not.
for this content. You should pump this content into your brain. That's a little shameless self-promotion there.
Yeah, good. It's not. I'm not saying it's all bad. It's just
No.
that like I think it does a few things, and then we'll get into what we really wanted to talk about. But
Well,
I think this is important. I really do. But I think the other thing that it does, you don't remember things the way that you used to, and your recall isn't that great. But it also decreases the amount of content your own brain actually creates. Creative ideas, all of those things, you don't really think about them, or your brain doesn't have time to process everything coming in, let alone create its own content. So, for some people, that content is being stuff they're creating for other people to digest but for those who are mostly just taking the content in and aren't creators, they are definitely not creating content in the same way.
Yeah, everybody thinks in clips and phrases now. Nobody thinks in a full planned segment in their head about what their day is going to be like, because you don't have to. It's in your phone, right? How they want to, you still have some people obviously that do it, but like you said, unless you are producing something regularly where you have to kind of plan it out, people just don't think like that as much anymore. which is a wonderful transition into AI in 2025.
Oh yeah, I mean it's getting pretty spicy out there, Sean, with the AI. I think it was about a month and a half ago. Showed up in like my X for you feed, which we were talking about. I look at that occasionally. I usually look at who I follow, but
Yeah, me too.
When I went into it, it was this like, can you tell the difference test, and it had videos, short videos of people doing really ordinary things like mixing cake batter or those kind of things without showing faces. And I got all but one of them wrong. I thought the
Really?
AI was real, except in one where I thought the real one was real. And I don't know why. They looked very similar. I really couldn't tell, and I just guessed, and I was wrong. There are still things that AI has trouble with, like faces in crowds, and there are certain things that sometimes pay attention to the hands, to those kind of things. But it's getting better and better, and it's getting harder and harder to tell which is real and which is not.
This year in AI, as far as their technology advancement, especially for video production, has been amazing. Like you said, a year ago, you could look for 6 fingers on one of the hands in a photo, right? You could look at the lighting on it, and it was just a little bit off enough where you're like, okay, there's an element of cartoonish there now that is gone, right? And AI, as we talked about, can be a blessing and a curse. I am all for anything where it lets people's creative spirit out. I'm all for stuff like, I've read a couple of really good books from people who I've seen comments, in short books, that because people can now publish all the time, which is cool. But I've seen the writers make comments of like, if I didn't have AI to be able to format this for me and do like editing for me, because I'm not great at spelling and grammar or this or that, I would never be able to tell this story. So I think it's good for people, because there are plenty of people who have great stories to tell and can create these great worlds in a book that you would not get without it. The trade-off to that is it's going to kill us all.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, like, did they not watch all the movies that they showed us what's going to happen, like Terminator, War Games, all of the movies,
Yes.
Going back. But
War Games.
then there's also this, Sean, that like at one point, I don't know, and I don't remember the name of it, but there was a AI written and performed song that was topping the country charts. So there's that piece of it. There's also an ongoing lawsuit of a kid who ended up killing himself.
Tragic.
And AI, he had been talking to AI and expressing, and AI, I think it was Chat GPT, which allegedly, so just so we don't get you into any trouble, but, gave him the suicide prevention hotline, but then proceeded to talk about the best ways to do it. And he ended up, unaliving himself, and his parents are suing. And then I've seen like all these stories of people falling in love with an AI, or people thinking AI is sentient and they're trying to help it escape. And then there are the stories of AI like trying to download itself and export itself so that it couldn't. So the update they were going to do didn't, quote unquote, kill it.
Right.
And I think there was one where AI started to threaten the programmer about the update. So, garbage in, garbage out, as they say. It's all about programming, but who are writing the ethics governing AI, and who are writing these rules that AI is living by?
And not living by in some situations.
Yeah.
I believe the case you were talking about earlier, the young person who committed suicide. There is numerous, and if you've used AI, and it is interesting to me, because if you use AI and you even say something slightly wrong, it'll stop right? I use ChatGPT for a lot of different things. And sometimes you'll prompt it and it's like, yeah, I can't give you that answer because the question you're asking isn't appropriate. You can rephrase it a couple times and eventually say, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm asking this. But it'll react to the key word that you said, this, that, and the other thing. But one of the things that we get into as far as ethics, which is a huge question, I know it's in front of Congress right now and states are bringing it up. How far do we limit that technology, or do we limit that technology? The free speech absolutists, you turn around and say no, because it is kind of an extension of a person's free speech when they're writing these programs that anybody can use, no more than if they had a newspaper in the 1800s and they started producing it themselves. And I totally understand that, because that's free speech absolutist. And then you look at what Australia recently did, where it's like, well, nobody under 16 can use social media at all. And it's like, okay, I understand the proposed intent, what you're saying publicly. I don't necessarily buy that as your actual intent. But the trade-off to that is, you're going to limit how people interact in what's considered the town square now, which is social media. Would you have limited a 16-year-old in 1852 to go to the town common and talk to his neighbors about X, Y, and Z? Or 14 years old? And granted, what they talked about then was different. I understand that. I understand the dangers of it. But I have an issue with government stepping into where parents should be. And I think that conversation blends to AI quite a bit here.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what the answer is, and I am a free speech absolutist.
Mhm.
So, but what I will also say is that I think children are different.
Yes.
I agree, that parents should be playing that role. I feel for parents, because it's really, really hard to keep your kid safe and off of things they shouldn't be into. We're also talking about parents who may have, issues around online addiction themselves and different things like that. So
Now in the second or third generation of it. So like you said, the parents are now fully engaged in it. And it's like, no, this is normal for me to doom scroll. So it's normal for my child to doom scroll. And you look at all these cases with Roblox that are coming up with alleged grooming that's going on in Roblox. You look at all of these different the predator cases where people are going in and acting like other 14-year-olds, and they find out they're adults and all that other stuff. It has changed how parents have to engage with their children. That being said, it is still the responsibility of the parents to make sure that how their children are engaging with the internet. I don't believe that you fully block them from it. I just had this conversation a couple weeks ago on the show, because then what happens is when your kid becomes of age, and especially with AI out there, right? And we're seeing how hard it is to spot to AI. Well, picture an 18-year-old who's never used the internet, that one kid that might be left in America, and all of a sudden at 18, they go and buy a phone because they can, and now they're getting all of this information, and they don't know what's real, what's not, what's safe, what's not, because anything can be real on the internet. So I'm one of those big believers it just like with firearms and other stuff, you have to teach your kids the safety parameters when you're engaging in it, and you have to introduce it to them in small pieces, and you have to be able to, but you also don't want the, oh my gosh, this is amazing, let me get into this all day long effect, which is the best example I can give it is the North Korean soldiers who were sent to Ukraine to fight on behalf of Russia got their hands on phones. This has been reported numerous times. They've never had free internet before. And now all of a sudden, after being completely living in a bubble, they're now experiencing the internet full bore, and they're experiencing pornography for the first time. And they couldn't get them to fight because they couldn't get them to come out of the barracks because they were on their phones that their Russian friends gave them, doom scrolling pornography. And to me, that is absolutely wild that occurred.
That's really wild, and I think I agree with you about that, Shaun. Parents, the base of it is parents just have to be more involved and pay more attention. And parents, I am not opposed to, if your child is under, let's say, 16, using Australia's age, and they have a phone, I think you should have a monitoring program on that phone.
100%.
And every day you should be talking to your kid about what are you looking at, and have the monitoring program to know if they're lying to you, and talking to them about, pornography and the impact that might have, and the fact that what they see in pornography is not what actually
Real life is at all.
real life is like, and women don't like what is actually going on in real life in most of these, in most of this. And so I think all of that is true, and the responsibility belongs to the parents. And I think that the danger for AI in many ways, I think, comes when you fully automate things.
Yes.
And you remove, going back to War Games, which is my favorite childhood AI movie, which a lot of people probably haven't even, that are listening, may never even have heard of. But and basically that is the idea, is when you take the human completely out of the chain of command of things, what does AI do when it gets that power? And I think that this is a really complicated situation. It's a really, like, it's one of those things, like, once you let the genie out of the bottle, can you ever get it back in? And where is that point at which that happens? And I mean, you just look at the Terminator and Matrix and all of the other sort of where technology. Yeah, there you go. War Games.
I just wanted them to see what it looked like.
But where, I don't know where at that point, and I think we may be past that already. I mean, I think I told you I found you through an AI program that helps me find podcasts. So, like, I think it can be a very useful tool. But I also think, and we can talk about this as we get into some of the other topics of the year in review, but the impact that AI is going to have on employment and jobs is something else that we're really not talking about. And I think, in part, one of the reasons why we see such high unemployment of college-educated young people right now is that the entry-level jobs in a lot of the sort of white-collar laptop class fields are already being done by AI. And so we're not having that conversation at all either. We're not talking, we have Elon Musk going on Joe Rogan and saying, oh, it'll be great. AI will do everything. Robots will do everything. And everybody will just get a generous basic income, not a universal generous income, not basic. And so everyone will be really happy, which is easy for him to say because he has his purpose. He has tons of money, obviously, and then he also has his purpose.
Right.
And so what is, wrongly, in my opinion, but rightly or wrongly, a lot of us define in our society our purpose through our work, through how we make money. And so if that's not there, what are people's purpose? And even the creative fields, as we were talking about, like books, you could just give prompts and AI will write a book now. I don't know if and apparently they're pretty good, I mean, the AI program I have drafts emails for me to send. I always edit them, but I will say that they're pretty darn good, and it mimics my writing style once it knows what it is and all that. So
I use AI a lot for the show production, right? I use it for formatting promotional stuff. I use it for, I'll lay out what I want my format for a show to look like on a night and say, okay, I need to schedule this down to times. I'm looking for this times, this, da, da, da. And it now knows my format. It now knows my time requirements. It now knows my length requirements. It'll ask me, does this segment have a video that you want to present with it? And how long is that video? So it can work at it. Like you said, there are benefits to it, but there's also tremendous drawbacks. And another tremendous drawback is, who is going to control the AI? At the end of the day, who is going to control it? Because if you have a government, say China, who somehow has a majority of control over AI, worst case scenario, but the implications and the tendrils of how far that can impact our everyday lives and potentially be used to control people well beyond their borders, which we already see. TikTok is a Chinese product. TikTok is not allowed for their kids in China. They can't have the app on their phone in China, but here they can, because it goes back to that doom scrolling, right, that we've talked about. And you start looking at if somebody, and I know every single program is small and individualized or whatever, but I use TikTok as the example because for the first couple of years TikTok was around, people didn't realize that it was a Chinese communist program. Chinese government had huge influence over what American kids were seeing and intentionally sending certain things to American kids. And then people were so comfortable with TikTok that when it came out of like, hey, this is a Chinese communist program and it's been used for propaganda and to kind of target the youth, most people went, oh, that's too bad, and just kept scrolling, right?
Well, and I remember, and I don't remember the organization, but there was a nonprofit that signed up on TikTok, and they signed up as though they were 14-year-old girls, and they immediately got inundated with gender ideology, trans stuff fed to them.
Go ahead.
And my brother's ex stepdaughter, my sister was talking to her one day about TikTok and how bad it was and how it's trying to lead her astray. And she was like, I don't care. You better not take my TikTok. You better not take it, and.
But that's the AI. And that's an example of what happens when you have a rogue government who controls AI. It's something we have to deal with. It's something where I agree with you. There's no right answer. No matter what you do, everyone's going to be pissed. I don't envy, and it's not often I will say this, I don't envy the politicians that have to actually try to draft something to control it. And it almost seems like it's almost like immigration and healthcare when nobody wants to touch it. They keep talking about it, but they don't want to touch it because either way they're hosed.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I also think, like, with so many things, they're just so far behind already.
Yeah.
They're so far behind. And,
because Chuck Schumer is so advanced with AI, I want him writing what AI shouldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the horse is sort of out of the barn already on this one. And I think that, we just have to be as conscious and aware as we can, and all of us calling stuff out. And, but I think I wouldn't be surprised by June of next year if the ways in which we can tell AI from real content have completely disappeared, and
I feel like you're right.
I mean, maybe that's a little early, maybe the end of 2026, but it's already really, really challenging. So, I guess, what does that mean, and what do we do about it? I think we just all have to be conscious and call it out, and each parent has to be responsible for their own children. And, I don't know. I think the government is not going to protect us. And I think in some ways it shouldn't, because like we were talking about, speech is speech. One thing that I would say is that non-human entities that might be like an AI avatar or whatever should not be given human
ever.
ever, ever.
And
And
I get so angry when I see people trying to pack with non-sentient beings. Like, the running joke is humans will create a pack with anything. And I brought this up in my show this week, or maybe it was a guest, doesn't matter. I watched a video of one of those robot delivery rope that they have in some of the cities, and the person was recording it, and they were like making a joke about it, and the robot ended up falling over in a curb, and the person said, "Aw," and I said, unless you feel bad for the person who's going to now not get their meal because it's destroyed and the robot fallen, why are you saying awe like it has some sort of soul inside of it? Like, we have
yeah,
to get away from things being cute also being human, because they are not.
no, they're not. And that brings to mind like one of my favorite movies ever. It might be, I have different ones depending on genre, but it's Blade Runner,
Yeah.
the original Blade Runner. And I would encourage anyone to take a look at that if they, it's based on a short story by Philip K. Dick called "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" And it really delves into, and as we're seeing, we're starting to get more and more robots and, pleasure dolls and all of this kind of thing. But they aren't going to be human, and we have an opportunity right now to have conversations while they don't really exist about what we want, what are the ethics with this, what do we want this to look like, and what do we need to put in place to protect humans in this environment. And again, we're not even having the conversation. We're just, like, okay, Optimus robots, the Elon Musk's robots, they're doing a pretty good job of making them not look human so far, right?
They're trying to keep that separation for now.
And I think that's really great. Well, they're also in the pleasure, in the sex realm and the girlfriend realm, they're not doing that. And yes, so I think,
I think that should be right there, like a sign of a mental, like, it should be like, oh, if you have a sex robot at home, you're clearly mentally ill and we should have you get some sort of medication. Like, it is so it is so bizarre.
Yeah, and it's getting worse. Like I saw a video someone posted about the morning in the life of a doll mom, and like she had these very realistic dolls that like. So what I am saying is I don't think that horse is out of the barn yet, but we're getting very close. Yeah, and
the door.
Having that conversation about what does it mean to be human, and what protections do we want humans to have from non-human entities, especially when you're getting into a technological and biological mix of them, which we're starting to see some things, and we may not all be on the same page. I certainly think a lot of our tech oligarchs and billionaires are not on the same page as us with this, and they're very transhumanist, and they want to see this technology human hybrid. And I'm not with that. I'm on Team Human. So
it is so weird. And we'll leave it there. AI in 2025 is a mess. When we come back at the end of 2026, we'll see if we were right or wrong. But speaking of human being human and digital and technology, digital IDs, I think, is a good segue. We were just talking about protecting being human. We're talking about, it being that separation from technology. But here we are, especially in Britain, primarily. China has this as well, but Britain was the big story, where there's this big push for digital ID, digitizing all of your important everything for the government to be able to see and use whatever they want.
Yeah, and I'm very much opposed to that. I think the Real ID push is a push towards that. I think, and we probably talked about this last time, I think, Shaun, but I believe in the Fourth Amendment. I believe that it should still be treated as though it exists, because it does. But things like a digital ID, I think, are blatantly unconstitutional. I don't know that the Supreme Court would agree with me at this point. Sadly, I would hope so, but like, they've already moved to certain government programs. You can't submit a paper application. You have to do everything digitally now and online. And so, the whole idea for people, just to remind you, is that as a sovereign human, as a sovereign citizen of this country, the government has no right to know what you are doing, and unless they can convince a judge using probable cause that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. But now, with the beginning of the elimination of cash, no more pennies. And you're starting to see this when you go into a store. If you try to pay cash, they don't have pennies. A lot of stores try to round you down. And that's why I always keep a handful of pennies in my purse, so I can always give them the pennies. But, every transaction you make will be tracked. And the other thing it does is it gives those people in finance and banks money every time you transact. And it sends a shiver down my spine when people are saying, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you have to worry about?
Right.
Well,
point.
And that's not the point. And the point is that who gets to decide whether you're doing something wrong or not? And it should be a court, and it should be a neutral arbiter. We saw them lock people up during the Biden administration for being conservative. And we should, and we are seeing last year in Britain over 12,000 arrests for social media posts. Okay.
Right. Opinions.
So,
For opinions.
For opinions, for memes, for,
and I want to clarify a few things. The banks already know everything you spend money on, because, like you said, everything's digital now. So fewer places, which I think part of your business license or your tax ID requirement for a business should be that you're mandated to take cash. Hey, you want a tax ID for your business, you have to take cash, because cash is still technically, the US dollar still exists. It's not just, let me rephrase that. The US dollar is still a thing. It doesn't necessarily exist the way it should. And that's an argument for the Fed. And we can talk about that in a different show for about 4 hours. But it is still our currency. It is still what we're based off of. I go back to the argument you like, banks, the finance guys will already know they already know, because they see what you spend your money on, because everybody uses their bank account and debit card on a regular basis, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent. I had this argument way back in the what was the movement against the Occupy Wall Street, where I'm watching all these people like, oh, we have to go down with big banks and big corporations, and they have too much power and too much control. And then I watch them in their Nikes carrying an iPhone with the Starbucks in their hand go to the Bank of America ATM right there and take money out. And I was like, but you're doing it. You're like everything that they want right there. Like, you don't want them to have all the control. You have the power to go to a small credit union somewhere or something like that. Like, we have so many times that we said we don't want them to do this, but then we don't change any of our behaviors away from it. We just stick with the convenience aspect.
We do, and I think
we sell that. And to make my point is, that's the sale for digital ID, right? That's the angle they're trying to go at, is your life is going to be so much easier It's not true, but that's what they're selling it as.
Yeah, and people buy that, and I think the younger you are, the more you are into that convenience, and cash is dirty and it's icky, and I've heard all these things,
Yeah.
and I go, like, I can't say I'm at a small credit union. I will tell you that the bank I ended up at is because the bank that I used to be at got bought and then got sold and then got bought, and then finally I'm at Bank of America. But I do everything I can to get cash and then spend that cash as opposed to using my debit card. Also, I try to shop at local stores and small stores. And when you pay with cash, that actually saves them 3%, right?
Exactly.
And all of that, and they usually appreciate it. And I got really tired of when I would go and want to withdraw more, than my daily ATM limit, going to the bank, getting asked what I was going to use the cash for. And I told them it's none of their business. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. And so, usually often it was because I was buying used equipment for my farm, and that's what I would say. Used equipment for my farm, I'm buying it from another person, I need cash. But they shouldn't be able to ask you that. Like, there's no reason why your bank should. I think that laziness and the desire for immediacy and convenience, is perfectly what they're using in order to drive us in this direction. And I also think that most younger people don't even really understand a right to privacy. They don't get it. They grew up in an environment where you post everything online. Everybody knows everything about everybody.
Yeah.
And why would you care? And if you're not doing, anything wrong, why would you care? And I mean, even people will post about things they do that are really wrong, so.
Which is
just really, it's really crazy to me too. And I am highly opposed to the elimination of cash and a central bank digital currency, because as you allude to in China, we already do have a social credit system here in the US in a way. People get debanked, they get deplatformed, they get all these things.
Cancel culture ushered that forward in this country a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it totally did. And so the tools are already there, and people are blindly walking into it. During the COVID lockdowns in DC, I was still living in Washington during that time. They were, I would say, probably increasing the number of cameras in DC threefold during that time, putting in the 5G, obviously, and all that. But we're walking ourselves lazily and conveniently into a digital prison surveillance state is what we're doing.
And I think you brought up a great point at COVID and how COVID ushered in so much of the digital aspect that people gave up of their lives, right? People walking around with their COVID passport in their phone so they could do this and they could do that. Like you said, the amount of money that was spent on expanding surveillance is a huge issue. And like I said, I worked law enforcement for a long time, and I'm against a lot of this stuff because it's like, I understand when something happens that it can be a tremendous aspect, but the trade-off to that is I also believe in the Fourth Amendment. The government should stay the hell out of your life unless you do something to bring the government into your life, and then that's kind of on you. But you look at digital ID and it goes beyond the currency, and it goes beyond just having your driver's license. So it's easier on you, which, by the way, it now forces everybody to carry one of these. And if you were opposed to it prior, just one of those people like, nope, never, I'll keep my little flip phone and be happy. No more. In Britain, if they pass this, you're going to have this. My first question was, is the government going to pay for that for people to have a phone? Because now you're mandating I have it. So it just like a driver's license, drive a car or whatever isn't a right. This is different, because I can choose not to drive a car, But when everything is required on a digital passport or a digital ID, you're forcing me to have something that I don't want to have. You should provide it. Now, that also means that your GPS will all of a sudden be on 24/7 and connected to your purchases, connected to your healthcare. People don't talk about that. Look, we all have issues in our healthcare. Like HIPAA in this country is huge. If you say the wrong thing in the wrong situation and violate HIPAA, you could be out of a job, you could be sued, all this other stuff. But you want me to carry all that information around in my phone that somebody could easily hack and be problematic. And more importantly, my right to privacy on my medical issues, right? That's between me and the doctor. And now you're mandating it goes between me and doctor. And I know how healthcare works. I know the government knows everything the doctor knows. At least let me have the image that it's still between me and the doctor versus having the go-between be the government. Like, oh, my medical records are now on the government website. It's so invasive.
Yeah, but I like I say though, Shaun, I think so many people don't even think of it that way. It's like, oh, it's just like getting more clicks. It's just like getting more, and so to me that is really, really problematic, and when you combine that with the contract that Palantir has to, make it so all of the government databases talk to one another. It's really kind of concerning, especially to someone who read a lot of apocalyptic future sci-fi and watched a lot of those movies. That it doesn't generally work out that great for people when for humans when this all happens. And I'm not out here doing anything that other than expressing opinion and truth that I'm worried about the government knowing. But as we have seen, depending on who's in power, expressing truth can be really problematic.
And Plantier, one of their softwares is called Gotham. Of all things to call it in that situation, that's absolutely frightening. And for people that don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Plantier is who's in charge of the upcoming digital ID in the UK. They're the ones who are putting all of the software and technology into it. Just so the listeners understand what it is.
And they also have very strong CIA ties and history.
Enormous. Yeah, that's the other. If you do a little research into them yourself, what you can find, but go to like page 8 or 9 if you're doing a Google search. Don't go to the first 2. Go to page 8 or 9 or 10, and you'll actually start getting the real information. And this also brings up the idea of hacking. Now, the most unbelievably, look, our military gets hacked. Everything gets hacked. How can you, as the government, promise me that my information will not be hacked? I mean, it's.
Well, you can't. I'm a former government employee, and my records were hacked out of the Office of Personnel Management. My health records have been hacked. My bank records have been hacked. I like having physical assets because I don't trust digital assets.
And people are so used to being hacked now. You get the notification in the mail of, oh, this organization was hacked, and as part of the settlement agreement, they have to offer you X, Y, and Z. They follow your
identity monitoring,
and people get that so often now that they just throw it out or delete it. They don't even pay attention to it because it's like, yeah, well, that's just another Tuesday. Of course, all of my information got hacked. Why wouldn't that happen?
And it's so. With all that being said, and then AI, like, how do you even know if it's really your bank contacting you or really anybody contacting you? So, I think it is really, really kind of, it's bizarre to me that we're just moving forward on all of this without any sort of real conversation about it, and it's just, I don't know how you stop it. I know, I met this guy at a conference and he founded something called the AI Trust Council, and it was an idea, and he's still working on it. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he's basically working to try to get some guardrails put on, even though we're moving forward. And I don't know, this digital ID. Basically, if once we fully move to it, and if we go to a digital currency, the government will have the ability to shut down everything that you do. And now let's just really talk about this, because we have now smart meters on our homes, right? Yeah. We have smart appliances, right? Mm-hmm. And we have smart cars. Now, if you're not a good citizen, whatever the government decides that means at the moment, they can shut all of that down with a flip of a switch. And no power, no car, no appliances, no bank, no purchases, nothing.
Mm-hmm. And you're on a 5-day timeout.
And if you might get worse than that, than 5 days.
Yeah.
But yes. And so you can't buy gas for your car. You can't, do anything. And quite frankly, the government should not have that power. Full mm-hmm. stop. Mm-hmm. No government, no human should have that power over another human, period.
And you look in China now, where they've gone with that is you can't even get on mass transit if you're in violation. And this is occurring now. This isn't even like in the future. This happens. They have facial recognition in some areas. And if your social credit score and the government isn't approving of what you bought for whatever, or what you said or whatever, you can't get on. It won't let you through that barrier to get on the train and go somewhere else. No, we're not. It is an apocalyptic movie. It is crazy to me to think the way we're seemingly not far away from you having a bad thought and then getting a notification on your government mandated phone to return to the processing center to discuss why you were having that bad thought. And we are there. And people, you brought up the whole, I don't care what the government, I don't do anything, so what does it matter? Which I have two states of mind about that. I'm one of those people, it's like, if the government really wants to waste its time in my boring life, they can work for it, but they're going to be overly disappointed with what they find, right? But they have to work for it. They have to go through all of the steps to get there. And for people who say, well, you're already digitized. I mean, look, you do a podcast and you have a website and you have your phone and you talk about it. That's all stuff that I'm willingly engaging in. I understand the risks that are with that. I understand the potential of being hacked. My email, or one of the emails that we have, I get emails all the time from people who are trying to either hack through my stuff or password requests, all this other stuff. It comes through 24/7. I understand the risks that are involved with it. And just like the risk of getting into my car, I understand that I could get T-boned at the next intersection. Those are choices that I'm making. But to have the government say at 3 p.m. every day, you have to get in your car and drive down the street and see if you get T-boned is not the same. That is not the same.
No, and you're also getting into the sort of, what was the name of it? I can't remember. But you're getting into like the thought crime area. You're getting into we can predict crime. And
iRobot?
Is it iRobot?
Or no, it was Minority Report.
Cogs. Yeah, Minority Report. Yeah, you're getting into that along with 1984,
Oh. I did lose Lisa. Hold on 1 second. Interesting. Hopefully Lisa rejoins me, because she was just about to talk about 1984, and Minority Report was a great movie where it was a Tom Cruise movie, but they could essentially predict, if you haven't watched the movie, what crime you were about to make and then arrest you for it. Oh, there we go. We were just having a brief conversation while you were going about Minority Report and what it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
Actually, since we're at a break, you're going to have to edit that anyway, right?
Well,
no.
now
Sorry.
I wasn't going to. I was going to play this as is.
Oh, you can.
Okay.
Never mind. So, yeah, I mean, Minority Report. Yeah, I was gone. I was trying to talk. I don't know, but yeah, it's really scary, and I think most people are just walking into it without thinking about it and what it means. And if they like could do what they did with the lawfare to Donald Trump, they can do it to any of us and anybody. And
especially when you're giving them willingly all of your information on a regular basis for them to do it with. Like you said, people who get arrested for crimes that they post on social media and then they're shocked they're being arrested for it. It's people don't understand in this day and age how important it is just to shut your mouth occasionally, and protect all of your assets. Like I said, the stuff you and I put out digitally, we understand what we're putting out, and we know that it's publicly consumed, etc. But that doesn't mean that I'm about to put my credit card number or my driver's license on screen for everyone to see or whatever. And surely I'm not going to go breaking the law and putting it up on TikTok for people to comment on, and then all of a sudden I get arrested and say, well, how could this happen? I do have to say that I wish I was still working in law enforcement, because how dumb criminals have made it incredibly easy in this day and age. So, like I said, in a year when you and I come back and talk about this, we'll see where Britain is with digital ID and how close we are to this country. Everybody should be unbelievably cautious about that and demand that it never, ever happens. But that brings us to political intimidation, because the way that's going to happen is the left and the right have a very different mindset, and you throw in independence and all this other stuff, but I'm just kind of making it simple, right? As much as the right uses technology, the left has like this weird need for it to be more and more and more. The right to a point, but like you brought up, so many of these robots and so much of look, all the tech nerds up until 5 years ago are the ones that are running these technology companies now that are massively leftist technologies, where they're completely invasive into your life. They want to know everything about you, and then they use that to social engineer their programs in order for people to use it. And politicians have kind of dialed into that too, because they're the ones who are getting all this information and how to present, promote, or demand programs. And that does fall under political intimidation, which in this year was unbelievable.
Yeah, political intimidation, political violence. I talk about this in the book on the chapter on propaganda and censorship that I wrote a lot. But all of the technology, all of these platforms were all developed by our military and intelligence agencies. Most of them funded through DARPA, so I think people don't realize that, and Facebook is a really good example of that. Facebook was Facebook was launched the day after DARPA shuttered a program called LifeLog, which was designed to get the log of your life. Your pictures, your videos, where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you
appropriately named?
Yes, LifeLog. And it was right after DARPA, or the Total Information Awareness Program, got outed and shut down. And the day after LifeLog was shuttered, Facebook launched. The day after. Mm-hmm. You can't draw a straight line. It's very hidden. But the other thing that I will say is that one of Facebook's first board members was Peter Thiel.
Yes.
And so all of this infrastructure that is the internet has the government behind it, and they are definitely, as we saw during COVID and we saw during the censorship, the government is still has its hands in it, and you should believe that anything you say on any of these platforms, even if it's in direct messages, is not private.
Yeah, it's not encrypted as much as they say. It may be encrypted to the average person, but the government still has full access. And it's a good reminder to tell people Al Gore didn't invent the internet. The internet was invented by the U.S. military for U.S. military applications, and to this day, unless there's something that's changed that I don't know about, every ounce of the internet runs through the U.S. government before it comes out the other side.
Yes, I think that's a really good thing to remember, and that I think the other really good thing to remember is the technology that we see and that we get to use is nowhere near as advanced as what the government has and is using with us and on us. And I say on us because I think that, part of what we're seeing with people getting more and more angry and more reactive is a result of the 5G frequencies that we are constantly being bombarded with now. There was a lot of research that was done in the 1970s. All right, I'm going to blank on his name, but basically looking at by the military, looking at these frequencies that 5G uses, and they definitely create a biological reaction in us that is not designed to keep us calm and peaceful and loving. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, and the problem I think that people forget too is it's not just one specific aspect that leads to all of this irritability, and living in silos and these political intimidation and this political violence. It is one spoke in the wheel, so to speak. Because if you look at, I mean, great example, and all of this studies. I don't know if you follow Data Republican on X, but she is unbelievable with the stuff that she takes.
Mhm.
She's talking about the rise of people like Nick Fuentes, who was a nobody up until recently, but with the right amount of money and the right amount of computers and the right amount of people, if somebody decides that they want you to be pushed for whatever reason, whether in this specific situation, I think it's to break conservatives apart, but then they will promote a wingnut like that, who just says some unbelievably awful things, and then using technology and using all of these computer banks and stuff like that make him seem more popular than he really is. It's I laugh because you go back to law, right? And you go back to whether or not something's entrapment. And the key to entrapment in the law is whether or not you're planting the seed of criminality, right? If the person's naturally having it, then you're allowed to produce with it, but you cannot plant the seed of criminality into a person because that's entrapment. And it's almost the same thing where they're entrapping people because they're planting the seed of making it seem natural and then letting it catch and then letting it grow, and it becomes a wildfire, if you will. And that's the amount of CIA psyop approaches to politics these days is incredible. Look at what the Seditious Six just put out a couple weeks ago, right? Where they're talking about how, oh, well, if you're in the government, if you're in the military, you don't have to follow an unlawful order. They never get into what an unlawful order is. They never say, if you feel like you're being given lawful orders, these are where you can contact, like reach out to us. They don't say any of that stuff. They just put out this blanket statement. Yeah, well, this is the same sort of ads that we would produce in the 80s and 90s in third world countries to create a coup, to create an uprising, which our CIA did. And it's the same mindset. So you start looking at all of these different aspects of political intimidation, and that goes beyond just the simple, this guy's an asshole post that somebody might make on X. Like that that is so on the top of what's really going on underneath.
Yeah, and I mean, I like along the lines of I'm starting to not be able to tell what's AI or not. I don't know how many accounts on X are actually real people. We thought that for example, just using X, but we thought that Elon Musk cleaned it out a lot when he came on, but I honestly don't know how many are real people. I don't know how many followers Nick Fuentes actually has.
Right.
I don't know any of that. And clearly, I mean, I think that you're 100% right that after Trump got elected the first time and Brexit happened, passed in Britain, our intelligence agencies, and I talk about this a lot in the book, and I use a lot of Mike Benz's work, if you know Mike Benz, when I talk about this, but they basically took all the tools that they used to create color revolutions, overthrow governments, and shut down populist movements. And I don't use populist in a negative way. I use it in a way of like the people are rising up against people who are, doing bad things. And they turned it against us here in the United States, which they hadn't.
Great example of a populist movement where they overwhelmingly just voted for a new president. He's not a bad guy. There's nothing wrong with him, but the movement was populist because he's actually speaking to the people of that country to better that country.
Yeah, and so I think we definitely are seeing that being used against us. It also fits in with the fact that the left has been trying to create a cultural revolution to push us towards communism and government control. And here's what I would say. I don't think the global elite cares exactly what the format is of the digital prison that they put us in. If it can be if they have to use communists, they will. If it's just what they are working towards is undermining the shining, city on the hill that is the United States, that has a First Amendment, that has a Second Amendment, and that had a Fourth Amendment, which I think is they've pretty much succeeded in removing that from the popular consciousness. But I'm not sure they care that much as long as there is a party that is in charge that gives them the power and keeps us, out of power. And I think that they've done a really good job in making the youth very, very unaware of real history in so many ways that I actually saw someone, I think it was on X, I can't remember, but a young person who was speaking of the Bolshevik Revolution in very glowing terms.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, I know. Without understanding the fact that, somewhere between 60 and 66 million people were killed. Many of them starved to death, many of them in mass graves and everything. And so
intentionally.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think that's part of, the challenge. And I think my point in bringing that up is that the tools are there to just destroy our constitutional republic, and
that's been the goal for a long time now. I mean,
for a very long time. Yeah.
You go back to the first time that they started calling the Constitution a living, breathing document, right? Right there, that was the first indicator publicly, not what they were saying behind closed doors, that publicly of, well, we need to change this and erode this because this is keeping us from being able to, quote unquote, achieve what we want to achieve. When the reality is, no, this is restraining government from impeding too much on your life, and government doesn't like that. You brought up on X, Elon Musk, and I think what happened was, I think Elon came in and I think he did a pretty decent job at first of cleaning everything out, but technology advances, right? And they said, okay, we'll get around that too. They added this effect recently that people don't talk about as much, but it's starting to let you see more about what people are actually when they joined, where their account is based in, where they're connected through, et cetera, as an example of trying to uh, uh, have more transparency in who you're dealing with. And we already saw, like, there's a guy on X, his name was Alex Cole, and he's still on X, but he was coming through that he was living in Washington State and Florida for a while and a couple other places, and how he always voted this way. And, he was this huge liberal and anti-Trump, and oh my God, I can't believe we're letting this happen to us. And then we find out he's from, like, the Virgin Islands, not the U.S. Virgin Islands, but the NASA, Aruba maybe. And he's actually based in Canada, and he's not even American. But for years, everyone was putting him down as like this staunch liberal American who is speaking up for American values, and he has a couple 100,000 followers on X. And then it exposed him to the fact that it's like, no, this is some Canadian dude who's trying to tell Americans how to vote, and it's crazy to me.
Well, I also think it's really hard to know who's being paid to say what they're saying. We've seen a lot of that, like the people supposedly getting $7,000 for pro-Israeli,
right?
X posts. And follow the money is one of my post-awakening sayings. Question everything, follow the money. So I think it's really hard sometimes with technology to tell what is organic or not, as we've seen. And getting back to sort of the political intimidation and political violence piece that we were talking about, I think in many ways it's used to make people believe that there's way more people on the fringes of both sides than there actually are, and that there's so many more of us who may be conservative but sort of in the middle, even though we are conservative, or because we want to conserve the Constitution but we're not on the far right edge or whatever, and to make it seem like people have more support than they actually do. And then you get into the echo chamber and the confirmation bias and all that stuff. And then you end up having things like people celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk because they think way more people think like they do than they actually do. And then they get in the echo chamber of it's okay to celebrate, the death of someone that you disagree with. And that's a really, really bad place for us to be.
Yeah, and we had that, we had a lot of people are very upset, and I agree. Trump's response to Rob Reiner being murdered last night was not necessarily worded in a way that would be considered positive. And, a lot of people are relating the two, and I said, okay, I understand that what he said, I don't agree with. I don't agree with how he said it. He could have been very, very short and to the point. But Trump puts an exclamation point on everything, and that's just what he does, like it or not. The difference was Charlie Kirk was speaking to people in generally and having nice, normal conversations with people, and he was shot for an opinion. If you understand Trump and you understand what Rob Reiner has said about Trump through the years, you can understand why Trump doesn't give a damn about Rob Reiner, because Rob Reiner made a lot of really egregious accusations against Trump. Again, I don't agree with what Trump said, but Rob Reiner's never attacked me personally, so my emotion about that might be different than the guy who's been shot once. Somebody else was trying to shoot him, all the lawfare, everything else. Like, I'm not excusing it, but when you look at the motivation behind something like that, it's like, yeah, Rob Reiner attacked him personally on so many different occasions and accused him of being a Russian asset and all these other things that really, if somebody was like that in your life and they responded and all of a sudden something happened to them and you're like, yeah, that's tough shit. Can anybody really blame you for that? Like, it's amazing how they're trying to connect what is actually political intimidation. Hey, if you speak normally to groups of young people and try to get them to engage and critically think, you're going to get killed for that. Is a lot
different. We're going to celebrate it.
Right. Right. And that's a lot different than a domestic violence incident that, however tragic it is, involving somebody who's done nothing but spew hate and vitriol at you. The two are not the same. It's apples and oranges.
Yeah, I agree with you, about that. And the whole thing that, I just be careful of. I mean, Trump says things all the time that I would prefer he didn't say, or I wish he would have said them differently. And there are a lot of things he's doing. I'm not exactly happy with. Okay. I will say this, and I've said this recently on another podcast. If the election were held again today, I'd vote exactly the same way I did. I'm not saying any, Trump regret. But I believe it is my duty as a citizen to express it when I think my government, my president isn't doing the right thing or not fulfilling promises that were made during, as part of a campaign. But at the same time, it wasn't like Charlie Kirk, because I watched a lot of I watched a lot of videos of him after he was assassinated. And the one thing that I can say is that to a video, if he disagreed with someone, he always ended it with good wishes for them, speaking positively, to them. He always looked for what he had in common with someone, something he could agree with them about.
Yep.
Okay. So if one of these people on the left who was on, TikTok, or wherever, Blue Sky, wherever they were, celebrating his death on X, wherever, if he had actually said something mean to them, if he had actually been, had a personal interaction with them in the way that Trump had with Rob Reiner, or Rob Reiner had at Trump, I might be having a different conversation with them. The truth is that they didn't know him, and they didn't even take the time to listen to an entire exchange between him and people. And so, I mean, that is a huge, huge difference. And, for someone like me who has made it sort of my mission to have open, truthful conversations and I hope that I could one day maybe be as like 100th as effective as Charlie Kirk was at helping people open their minds. It's really, really frightening, that reaction, and it is designed to shut people up. It is designed, yeah. And so, it's not going to do that. One of the things that we talked about last time I was on, I think, is that I let go of fear. I let go of fear in order to be awake and to see things as they truly are and to speak truth. At the same time, I don't think that's a place as a society we want to be, where people believe that you could be subject to actual physical violence for speaking about things. So, this has been a very challenging year in that regard, and
the idea that words are violence is one of the worst lies and mental destruction that I think that has happened to us as a society. Because like you're pointing out brilliantly, it has completely washed away positive discourse. Being able to disagree with somebody and still shake their hand and still think that they're a good person. And look, a lot of people on social media, and we're so used to it, we brought this up before, of social media kind of pushing in what they think they want you to see, right? So many people go on social media and show their ass when it comes to stuff like this. But what doesn't get highlighted is how many people say, look, I just don't agree with you, but I don't want anything bad I want you to be successful. Like Charlie Kirk used to say. A lot of times, he would end a lot of his conversations with people he disagreed with of like, I want you to be well. I want you to be successful. And we can disagree, and that's okay. And Charlie Kirk's thing was like, I don't want you to be this way because I don't want you to be this way. I don't want you to be this way because he's very spiritual, and it goes back to his book, which he has entirely every right to be. But also is a lot of people can see the damage that it's doing to you. I think of one interview that he did with a girl who, she was a liberal, and she started to talk, and she brought out how she's depressed. Has this anxiety and stress and all this other stuff. And you could tell he was generally concerned for her. And he kind of didn't sidestep the conversation politically, but he kind of got through the political thing and then was encouraging her, like, I hope you get well. I hope you're successful. I hope you're able to fight your demons because you deserve that as a person. And I think it highlights what the majority of America, center left, center right, whatever you want to call it, feels. It's like, yeah, societally, we shouldn't allow X, Y, and Z in the classrooms or being pushed to our kids and that stuff, because that's stuff that's removing parents from the conversation. That doesn't mean I give a shit what anyone does behind a closed door. Two grown adults, a car battery, and a gallon of oil is up to them. Like that's have fun, have at it. Just don't involve other people. You don't need to involve other people.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to what we were talking about too. That everything is public, nothing is private anymore, and I think that that's a huge, huge problem. And I think along with that is sort of the idea that if you believe what you believe is morally superior to someone else, then you get a right to tell them they can't say or do something, and that is obviously not consistent with our Constitution, but also is a really slippery slope to like taking away people's rights, because somebody then has to decide which moral superior position people get to legislate or create in our society. And and I think that's kind of consistent. It used to be, I thought that people on the left would do the same thing. I wish the best for you. I want you to be well. I want you to be better. But it has gotten to the point where they really don't do that anymore. And they
want it to be.
Huh?
They don't want you to be.
No.
They don't want you to exist if you disagree with them. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, and so that is really, really problematic. And I don't know how we fix that. Shaun, and I think, again, it's going to come back to something I'm sure we talked about last time, and that is, I sadly have to say, it's not going to happen on technology. It's not going to happen here. This conversation we're having, any conversation you're having online, first of all, it's not going to get through to the people who you might actually reach, probably. The algorithms are going to mess with it. But the other thing is that, it's much harder to demonize someone in person. It's much harder. I saw one of Charlie Kirk's where this woman walked up and she was all ready to fight him, and she asked him a question. He answered it honestly, and she was like, well, that kind of changes the whole thing, doesn't it? It's like, I thought you were going to say you wanted a Christianity to form the basis of why we have certain policies, and you were going to want to make me be a Christian. And that isn't at all who Charlie Kirk was. He, in fact, did want everyone to be a Christian, but for their own,
not for him,
salvation, and not for him. And he would never, he wouldn't want a government that forced you to be a Christian, So, and then after that, they talked about something else. But the whole point is, in person, he was able to get that across, and I don't think he changed her mind about much. But the difference is, I think it all comes back to community and making a difference in person in our communities. And one of the things I think I might, again, like you, I love technology and I hate it. Mm-hmm. I think it's ruining us and it's saving us. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to balance it, but I'm really toying with the idea of starting an in-person digital detox peer support group.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Just getting people together.
Board games.
Yeah, board games, but even just to talk, to begin with, just creating a safe environment to for people to say, you know what, I really hate this technology and what it's doing to my family. And when I go out, when my partner and I, we live about a half hour from where all the good restaurants are. So if we drive into town to go out, which we don't do all that often, I mostly cook for us, and I love to cook. You were saying, I think before we started recording, you love to cook as well. But if we go into town to go to dinner and we're not doing anything else and there's nothing else in particular going on, we leave our phones at home. We don't even bring them. We just go and And every time we go out, well, first of all, when I mention that to people who are much younger, they're like, I don't think I could do that. What in the world? And I'm like, really? It's a couple of hours. You know, like I used to go like all day with no phone, and it was okay. Yeah, it was just fine. It didn't matter. But they can't imagine it. But then I go out and we're sitting at a restaurant, and sometimes I'll look around and no table is talking. They're all on their phones. And so I just think
I wish MP3 players would just come back, just a regular MP3 player, because I love music but I also listen to a lot of comedy. I listen to a lot of just different stuff when I'm and I'll tell you, I wish I could just good example. I love this ramen place up the street. They have a little ramen bar where I go by myself all the time, right? I like to listen to my music, and I always keep one earphone in and one earphone out. But if I could just bring an MP3 player to do that and leave my phone at home, I would do it every single time without thinking twice. Because I do talk to the staff; they're wonderful people, but they're busy, so they're not going to be there conversing with me the entire time, and they don't play music because it's just like a very loud restaurant, right? So in that situation, it's like, I wish we would just have MP3s again, because I just want to take my music with me. But I don't be connected.
And, when I lived in DC before I moved, I lived about a mile away from Rock Creek Park, which runs through the center of DC. And I used to walk over there with my dogs, and I had an old school iPod, which was an MP3 player.
Right.
And I would leave the phone at home. I would bring it, and one ear in, one ear out. So I was always situationally aware, but it was great because then I just had my music. There was no temptation. The other great thing about Rock Creek Park, the trails I went on, is there was no reception anyway. So even if I brought my phone, it wasn't tempting. And I was hiking, and so I was getting exercise, connecting with nature. I would do some forest bathing, in the woods there and all of that. And I think that's great. They unfortunately don't work anymore. The old school. I mean, they're so old, but that whole idea, of detoxing and getting off of social media and not having the constant ping. But I think it's really challenging for people. So that's the idea that I've been thinking about. And one of the good things, if you do a peer support group or something, there's no licensing requirement, no permitting, nothing like that. It's peer support. So you're not saying you're an expert. And believe me, I'm not. Like, I'm struggling with the same digital issues that everybody is. And so I'm not trying to tell you I have the answers, but I do think those kind of things are a way to sort of start the healing process of this is my neighbor. I have more in common with them than I dislike them or unlike them, I should say. And the more you can do that, the harder it is to dehumanize other and all that.
But this up during the first time you were on, and I still think it's a great idea because we've talked about this digital detoxing. And you were talking about how, people used to just hang out a lot more. There used to be a lot more Christmas parties or Halloween, whatever party it was, right? House parties were a much more common thing. And I grew up with a bunch of different house parties in my family, either at our house or going to other houses. Nobody ever talked about politics. Nobody ever talked about, you were talking about, your day-to-day life and what you made this week or what you wanted to make this week or who you went to or when you're going camping, right? You were just talking about and getting to know people as a person, not just one portion of their identity being politics.
Well, I also think that a lot of activities have sort of disappeared too. People used to do. And so, I mean, the other thing too is that we're so in touch with people online that what is it that I have to talk to you about in person if we're constantly texting or messaging or whatever it is we do. And people have much less to share with one another, I think, in a positive way. And again, that's why we need to get off of technology every so often. I remember when I was on Facebook before I ditched all my social media, someone started like a Facebook group in my area for sort of people who are into holistic healing and, natural products. And it was a great group for a little while. And then I had the audacity to suggest we should try to get together in real life. The group
How dare you?
I know, but the group completely fell apart, Shaun, and then it disappeared. And I was just like, but I think it's really hard for people now. And to even imagine, we were talking about like time being so weird and fast, and that might have been before we started recording. I don't remember if we were talking.
I think it was.
Yeah, but I think that's another aspect of it, is like people just don't have the time, to devote to things. And parents, let the kid look at the phone instead of running them around to 6 different activities like our parents and parents used to. And so it's challenging, but I think that may be one of the, really important things that we do is to, our attention is the most valuable thing that we have. And right now we give it to a lot of things that probably don't deserve it. And we sacrifice the things that are right in front of us that could be amazing. And it's hard because, again, when you go on a hike, you're not getting, and you don't have your phone, you're not getting the constant dopamine hits that you get every time your phone dings or every time you watch a TikTok video. And I think our brains need a dopamine reset too. I think they really do. And there are ways you can do that. But
well, and I say this all the time, and I may have told you this last time. I look forward every week. My neighbor is a friend of mine, and his parents come over, and we do a weekly dinner every Sunday night, like clockwork, where we just sit around for 2 hours, eat dinner, and shoot the shit. And I look forward to that so much every single week because it's not any heavy lifting. We're usually just laughing and joking and giving each other a hard time about X, Y, and Z. And it is a weekly detox for me because I'm not on my phone nearly as much unless something comes up that I have to be. But we're just hanging out and we're just being people and we're just talking, and I think that needs to happen more. I think your peer support idea is great. I'm telling you, the first time you do it, you have everyone come in and just sit down and play Monopoly, and then the worst is out of the way. Don't even introduce yourselves, just sit down at one of the tables, play Monopoly. Great, somebody threw the board across the room. Now we can start to be human again. Like, get it out of your system. Because
and so I think maybe that'll be my early 2026.
I think it's a great activity.
idea. And I think we'll see how it all goes. But I think that is a big piece of it. Is like rehumanizing each other and having in-person experiences and doing those kind of things. It's challenging, but I think we should look at that. And so maybe, I guess we were talking about political intimidation that got us to this point. I don't know if you want to go back to our year in review list or.
Well, and we, it's funny. It all kind of comes back to the same thing. All of these has come back to a digital detox being an issue on one way or another. Forgot I was muted, ladies and gentlemen. That was part 1 of my interview with Lisa Ekman. Tomorrow night will be part 2. It'll air at 6 p.m. Pacific before BZ's show. It's only about 40 minutes or so, 39 and a half minutes. I think it wraps up nicely. I didn't want it to go a full 2.5 hours tonight, which is what it would have been. And I just felt like each section deserved its own time. So thank you very much for joining me this evening. The recording will play tomorrow night. It will not be live hosted. I will be in the chat room for it, but it'll just play on its own. So please check it out, like and share. The podcast for part 1 on Apple Podcasts is available. Also, you can find it on Spotify, YouTube Music, any other place. If you want to grab the podcast, finish listening, part 2 will release at 6 o'clock Pacific time tomorrow evening. That's going to be it for me tonight. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us. I really greatly appreciate you being here. Please like and subscribe wherever you're watching from. Subscribe to the network. We're so close to 700. I think we're at 695. We just want to get over that threshold before the end of the year. We think that would just be a fun little boost for SHI Media. Please check out the articles on shimedia.com. We have updated articles today about what the tragedy at Brown University in Bondi Beach in Australia, and some other articles that are on there. Big E just finished a great article on 2A, the Second Amendment, that I think everybody, if you want to learn everything about the Second Amendment, it's not partisan, it's not opinionated. It is the text, it is the founders' writings, it is the founders' intent. It is something that you need to totally check out, and that's on shimedia.com. So please check it out. Thank you to my friends over at KLRN Radio who simulcast this show tonight and every night, and I greatly appreciate it. And I hope you have a good couple days. I will see you tomorrow evening. Take care. See ya.